Hey actor friends, welcome back. Today I'm looking at the character of Margaret of Anjou. This video is going to be kind of a cross between a character analysis and a character journey. So I'm going to dot point what we see of Margaret over the 4 history plays that she's in, and I'm going to give you a little bit of character insight that you can use to help you prep. Let's jump straight into this. So we first meet Margaret at the end of Henry VI, Part 1. In terms of your prep, I wouldn't bother reading that whole play because she really does just pop up towards the end. And what you need to know is that Henry VI was considered kind of an ineffectual king. He's lost a lot of French territories after, England and France have been at war for a really long time. And so he's in a bad position, and he's been advised that he should maybe marry a French woman, try and improve the situation politically. So he sends the Earl of Suffolk to go and find someone that might be a good fit for him. And the Earl of Suffolk finds Margaret. Now, in Shakespeare's play, the Earl of Suffolk meets Margaret and is very obvious about falling in love with this girl very, very quickly and saying, I'm going to bring her back to my king, but actually I'm going to keep her for myself and then I will have the power and the woman. Historically, that was probably not the full story, or maybe not it at all. Because Henry was not really considered a great catch after losing all these territories, Margaret of Anjou might have been the only person that was the right fit for him. Henry VI was made king at 9 months old because his warrior father, Henry V, who was very well renowned, died. And because he was so young, he had all these advisors around him helping him. But that kind of meant that he grew up not really trusting himself and making a lot of bad decisions, essentially. In the beginning of Henry VI Part 2, we see Margaret kind of welcomed in by the court. Henry is totally happy with this pick, even though she brings no dowry, which is a big deal because England is very poor and they really need the money. And so, but the advisors around Henry are kind of annoyed, apart from Suffolk. There's a lot of infighting, and that's kind of what the whole play is about. Margaret's role in the play is essentially an evil queen, one of Shakespeare's evil queens, and I'm going to link another podcast about that in the description as well. That's an interesting topic in itself. Essentially, she is kind of a bad guy. She's sort of not to be trusted. And so what happens in that play particularly is she's kind of manipulative. That's sort of her role. She's always seen through the lens of being someone's partner, whether it's Henry or Suffolk. She's not really a powerful force in herself. And so her monologues particularly are about manipulation and frustration too. So she's come to this court expecting Henry to be this amazing guy, and he's really disappointed her. And that's kind of the topic of her monologue, Say Is This the Guise, where she speaks to Suffolk about all the infighting that's happening and how Henry is kind of a wet blanket instead of being a commanding guy like Suffolk. She then proceeds to kind of manipulate everyone around her with Suffolk in hand, trying to make things work for her, trying to gain power essentially by wiping out the other powerful forces, the other advisors. So if you are doing a monologue from Henry VI Part 2, you really want to think about, where is the frustration? Where is the manipulation? What kind of mask has she put on because of the people around her? So a good example of that is in her Can You Not See or Will You Not Observe monologue, where she's talking about Gloucester and how he's really terrible, whereas actually he's pretty okay in this play. She's really trying to manipulate Henry because she wants to bring Gloucester down. So a lot of that is happening throughout that play, especially in the first half. What then happens is that Henry starts to become a bit suspicious of Suffolk and sends him away. He banishes him essentially, and then he gets beheaded by pirates. I love this play, it's insane. If you want to know more about the plays itself, I would really recommend watching either The Hollow Crown or check out Tim Nance's channel. He has some very entertaining breakdowns of what happens through the whole of each of these plays, so that's a really quick way to get some insight as well. I will link all these things below. One of the most memorable moments in this play is after Suffolk has been beheaded by pirates, she carries around his head, weeping and wailing. And Henry VI is like, this seems weird. Would you cry like that if it were me? No, Henry. No, she wouldn't. And then there's kind of a lot of fighting as Richard, Duke of York, tries to take over the whole thing and is like, I should be king. She's very resistant to this, of course. She tries to put Richard, Duke of York in his place, but to no avail, essentially. So part 3 is really about battles. It's very fierce, and there's a lot more sort of psychological drama happening in it, which is why I think you see a little bit of shift in her character. So her character shifts a lot with Shakespeare's writing. Part 1 is pretty clunky writing. They suspect that maybe it was a collaboration with Shakespeare and another playwright, so it's not the best, and we see that in her character is not that interesting. Part 2, it feels very kind of camp to me. It's kind of big and crazy, and so she's very manipulative, and it feels almost a little over the top. Obviously you want to make her well-rounded, but it might feel that way to you. She's a little bit sulky sometimes. And then part 3, we shift to warrior woman, because the play is about these battles, and so a lot of the imagery and a lot of the language of her monologues and generally in the play is about battles. It's about people dying. It's rich, it's raw, it's hard work. So if you're doing a monologue from Henry VI part 3, you want to look at her fierce battle self, the kind of grounded warrior woman that's powerful and terrifying and kind of angry. Something that might help you here is remembering that she is now a mother of Prince Edward, who she wants to be king, and that's her driving force. In terms of the timeline, it makes no sense because in part 2 she didn't have a son, and then suddenly she's got a fully grown son in part 3, despite the fact that it just takes up in where they left off in part 2. So it makes no sense at all. So don't try and make sense of that. But you do need to understand that this is what drives her. It's all about her son, who dies at the end, spoiler, dies at the end of part 3. And that's where she sort of starts to fall apart. So very interesting journey for her in part 3, being this warrior woman who is sick of Henry VI and all his BS, to leading the troops. Now historically, probably not what actually happened, but in terms of Shakespeare, leading the troops and then falling apart when her son is killed. Her son is killed by Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who is the son of Richard, Duke of York. He goes on to become Richard III, who we know very well as the kind of hunchbacked, evil, scheming guy who kills a lot of people, including Margaret's son. To be fair, Margaret killed his dad and laughed at him and wiped the blood of a 12-year-old boy all over his dad. So that is dark. She does some horrible things. She is not a nice person. I think to help you make this a well-rounded character, it is important to think about the driving force of her son, wanting her son to be king, and the big motivation that happens at the beginning of part 3 is that Henry VI says to Duke of York, who is, trying to take the crown, you know what, let me reign until I die, and then yes, you, Richard, Duke of York, can be king, which essentially means that his son cannot be king. He renounces the throne at the end of his life, essentially. So the monologue where Margaret comes in and says, enforced thee, and is totally mad at him, is all about how Henry has given this up for their son. He's completely idiotic, really. And it's because he wants peace, but she wants the crown for her son. If you think about back in those days, they needed a lot of security, and sometimes that's to do with the power that's around them, especially for women. So if she's losing the power of Henry, she wants the power of her son. But it's not just about a power grab. It's that her son is the thing that she cares about. So this is the thing that's going to make her a well-rounded character, caring about her son. She is also vicious. Can't get past it. At the end of Henry VI part 3, they say, what do you want to do with her? And King Edward's like, send her to France. But in the next play, she's still around for some reason. I don't know if someone just forgot about her. And she's sort of a little bit bonkers. She's coming out and cursing everyone. It's very bitter, but it's incredibly powerful. The monologues in Richard III are really better for someone who is maybe an older kind of casting type. It doesn't need to be a lot older, but she definitely has that kind of maturity. You get a sense that she's aged a lot over time, despite the timeline being completely like bonkers. Her role in Richard III, I think, is really to bring to light all the things, all the terrible things that people have done in order to get to where they are. Not just Richard III, but everyone around them. They've kind of done horrible, horrible things to get to power. And she is a reflection of that. And because of it, she's sort of gone mad. When I say she's cursing people, she's genuinely trying to curse them in a way that would have freaked out an Elizabethan audience, which is sort of like literally trying to bring bad spirits upon people in a lot of what she says. That's a lot of what goes on. And what I think is most moving about it is when she has a moment of reflection with Elizabeth, who knows her time is nearly up, she's the current queen, and thought she was doing very well. And Margaret's just reminds her, you don't understand this whole thing. You don't know how this game works. You thought you had this nice cushy position. Now your kids are dying like my kid died. You know, everyone around you is gonna die. You might die too, and you'll see. You'll see. Oh, it's chilling. It's chilling. So historically, she probably would have been gone to France already by then, but Shakespeare brought her there as a reflective mechanism, essentially. So if you are doing a monologue from Richard III, think about what she represents, what she brings up. She's a haunting, almost like a ghost. So there are a lot of resources out there talking about Margaret. Just be aware that historically it's just not the same as what was in Shakespeare's play. You need to understand her in the context of what she's in. Each play is very different, as I talked about. So understanding the vibe of the play can help you understand what she's doing within it and how she fits within it and the vibe of her monologue. So do that extra bit of research. You can watch something like The Hollow Crown, which is going to give you kind of the oversight of the full storyline. What The Hollow Crown doesn't give you is how much the tone changes from play to play. So if you can get your hands on a copy of, you know, part 2, part 3, or even just scenes, just watch whatever you can get your hands on. Audiobooks as well are a good way to go. It will give you a sense of the changes and how she fits within it. I think as actors, it's really important to think about tone because it gives you a lot of information about the character, about delivery, about how to make it work, and motivation, what's going on. So think about that, think big picture. And hopefully this video has given you a little bit of help with that. I know it's epic. You've got to give yourself plenty of time if you're doing a Margaret monologue, but oh my goodness, is it rewarding because her stuff is amazing. And that's it from me. Oh my goodness, epic. See you guys next time.